Hello, everyone. This is Jamie Lewis, and I'm from Identropy. I'm going to give folks just a minute or two more as we have a number of participants who are still coming in. So just bear with us for one more minute. For those of you just joining us, we're going to get started here with our webinar just momentarily. Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar with Identropy, Getting and Keeping Organization-Wide Support for Your IAM Program. My name is Jamie Lewis-Gross. I'm responsible for advisory services here at Identropy, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's session. With me today, we have your host, your presenter, Jeff Steadman. Jeff Steadman is a member of the Identropy Identity and Access Management Strategy team. He has 13 years of experience focused on developing IAM programs and operational teams. A couple of areas in which he has led IAM program efforts has been with clients such as Walgreens and S.C. Johnson, a couple of brand names that most of you are very familiar with. And one thing that's really important here with respect to Jeff and his experience is that he has walked in your shoes. So he has a lot that he can bring to the table in terms of helping you guide your IAM program to success and really how you enable stakeholders to go that journey with you. So just a couple of housekeeping items that I would like to cover. The first being, we will take a couple of questions at the end of the webinar. And if you could email us at webinar@identropy.com, we'll go ahead and review those questions. Any questions that we're unable to get to, we'll be sure that we send to you a follow-up email response. So with that, let's go ahead and get started and turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Jamie, and thank you to everyone who's taken the time out of their day to join us, whether they've just had lunch, eating lunch, or about to eat lunch. We're going to talk through this presentation called Getting and Keeping Organization-Wide Support for Your IAM Program. Got a few different topics that I want to cover. One I'm calling the IAM Spheres of Influence. We're going to talk about creating the right IAM team, how to message to key stakeholders, how to get buy-in throughout the organization, some things to think about from a continuous improvement cycle, and then some other things to consider before we get to the Q&A section. So the first thing that I want to talk about is what I call the IAM Spheres of Influence. If it sounds a lot like the conjoined triangles of success from Jack Barker of HBO's Silicon Valley, well, kind of close. While his is satirical, it actually does have some basis in real-world software development. And it struck me that we could probably apply the same kind of thinking to the IAM space. So without further ado, here's what I call the IAM Spheres of Influence. Essentially, we've got 5 spheres, and they're security, cost, usability, efficiency, and compliance. 5 different spheres, different verticals they focus on. Every organization is different. You're going to find that your organization may lean towards a particular sphere of influence, and you're going to have to adjust your message to match your organizational posture. So, for instance, if you're in finance, you may be leaning towards, as an organization, towards compliance and security. If you're in retail, you're probably looking at things like usability and security for your customers. And then from a manufacturing perspective, you're probably thinking about how to improve cost and efficiency. Those are general guidelines. Every organization is going to be different. It's going to be up to you as an IAM professional, maybe a program manager, a member of a team, to identify where you should be adjusting that message. So when you think about the messaging, really what you want is you're going to sell your IAM services internally. Like, why are we doing this? Why is it important? And you want to make sure that it's consistent and that the messaging lines up with what's important for the different folks that you may be talking to. If you think about risk and audit, they're concerned about how do you comply with your different controls, regulations. You got PCI, you've got NIST standards, you've got HIPAA, SOX, right? All kinds of different things. GPDR coming around now. And they're probably focused more on the compliance and the security side of things, regardless of where the organization as a whole may be leaning towards. If you think about executives and CISOs, right, it's all about reducing risk, how do you improve efficiency and reduce costs. So they're going to probably fall in between that compliance, security, and cost area. Doesn't mean that they don't care about things like efficiency and usability, but those are typically areas that I see CISOs, for example, focusing on. From an IT perspective, if you're running a help desk, for example, or IT infrastructure, what you're really going to do is to lower your costs, increase your efficiency, and drive usability. You want users to be able to have self-service options. You want them to be easy to use to reduce phone calls to the service desk, for example. And if you're on the business side of things, really you want technology to not be in the way of your job. So you're thinking about usability and how do you get through quickly and how do you have efficient processes so you can actually do the work that you need to do instead of focusing on admin type tasks. You're going to want to make sure that you take these spheres into account as you develop your marketing messaging, and that's one thing that as an IAM program you should always be doing is marketing internally to your organization. So as we're talking through this presentation, this conversation, I'll refer back to this, but think about from yourselves and your perspectives, how these spheres might influence your messaging through your organization. One thing that you're going to want to know as an IAM program manager is you really need to know it all, right? You got to be able to talk through all of these different areas, through all of these different folks and business units, and be able to really talk the talk that resonates the best with those areas. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about creating the right team. And really, you're going to probably boldly go where your organization has never gone before when it comes to IAM, or maybe you've gone there before and failed. In my mind, it really starts with program management, right? You've got the captain of the ship. He's responsible for making sure that everything is running smoothly and that there's a strategy and vision that's being set. You've got project management, who makes sure that the crew and the directives being issued are being followed and that they're staying on task and on schedule. You're going to have architecture and engineering, people that are building and designing and putting the different pieces of the technology together and how they're integrate with different systems. You're going to have security, making sure that all the people and the processes and the technologies that are put in place are following security policies and best practices to make sure that data is kept secure. You're going to have your support group, so making sure that not only is the team healthy, but your customers and your other constituents are supported, whether it's call center or customer support, email box, etc., making sure that any issues that come up or requests are taken care of. You're going to have analytics. You're going to use your IAM data to provide measures of success for your program and also potentially to help spot anomalies in the different user behaviors that you might be collecting as part of your IAM program. And then you're going to have consulting. Consultants typically fill in a number of areas. They can span anywhere in this stack, whether it's program management or project management. Maybe you're bringing in some contractors to help from an engineering perspective or from an ongoing support. Really, they kind of augment the ability for an IAM program to be able to have the appropriate skill set and roles that are out there. It's important to note that each of these roles are going to be an ambassador for the IAM program, right? So they all need to consider those spheres so that when they're having their dealings throughout the organization, that consistent message is being shared. One of the things that is important from an IAM team perspective is making sure that from a leadership perspective, you've got that executive and senior leadership backing, right? They should be in full support of the IAM program. They should be communicating downwards into their organizations to help their folks understand the value that the IAM is bringing to their teams. And from a leadership perspective within the IAM team, they need to make sure that they have the appropriate experience, budget, and strategy. Folks that have done this before, armed with the appropriate funding. It is a program, not a project, so it is something that you want to fund as a program. And then a strategy that makes sense and aligns with the business objectives, but is also realistic and takes into account, the capabilities of the organization and how quickly they may or may not move through different phases. From a team perspective, you've got to have people who understand how your processes work today, because you need to know where you're at today to be able to adjust as needed and shift into the future. Those folks are going to have to be willing to get out of their comfort zone, probably going to have to learn new technologies maybe that you don't have today to be able to support the different tools that are being put in place. And most importantly, those folks have to understand that there's a need for change and embrace it. So they need to be able to be proponents and, again, ambassadors of what is that IAM message that's going out, and the team as a group needs to understand that. And really everyone, from the project management, program management, and all the way down to consultants that may be working for you, they've got to be change agents for the organization. They've got to be able to understand what's the IAM mission, what are the benefits that are going to be coming out of it, and they've got to be able to communicate those effectively to the folks that they may interact with. So from a messaging perspective, we've talked about the team and the different spheres. How do you get the message out? How do you engage the different types of stakeholders? From the first part, you probably think about, well, what's in it for executives? How are you going to talk to them about what's important? Well, how does IAM reduce risk? How do you make sure that you know who has access to what? Are those folks in compliant with the different controls and regulations that you might have to adhere to? Is your organization efficient? Is it spending the right mix between people, process, and technology? How do you better safeguard the organization? From a business perspective, you want to talk about things that improve their service usability. So as you're building out the IAM services, things like self-service password reset maybe, or how do you request access to different resources within your company, that those are very easy to use. And that stretches into things that managers and lines of business typically have to do when it comes to things like reviewing access. A lot of companies still today use spreadsheets, emails that are attached to these giant lists of people that say, hey, here's all the people that report to you, is that correct? Sometimes that's easy to do, sometimes it's not, especially if you're in a big organization with a lot of different moving parts and pieces. And you want to make sure that services that you're building around that, from a messaging perspective, you're going to show them how you're going to save them time and give them better information to make accurate decisions when it comes time to review that access. And then from a security perspective, it's foundational to know who has access to what. That's an important part of any security program. You can't secure what you don't know, and if you know who has it, it makes it a lot easier. And then when it comes to provisioning of access, when someone leaves the company, security, one of the security tenets that I've seen throughout the organizations that I've worked at and worked with is that they all have a thing in common. They want to make sure that access has been removed when someone has left the company. One of the common things that comes out of that is there's the fear that not all access was removed. And if you don't have that inventory and you can't say accurately at any given point who has access to what, there's going to be a problem, or there's a potential for a problem. So being able to drive the IAM message that you'll be able to provide that awareness is a key part for the security team. When it comes to IT, we talked about the standardization of service delivery, and that applies to IAM as well. So what is the consistent process that the teams can follow, whether it's supporting it or maybe interacting with it from a customer perspective? And customers can really be internal users or external. If you're building IAM services, typically everyone's a customer. It's just a matter of whether or not they're an employee, a contractor, or maybe truly a customer in the traditional commerce sense. But you want to have standardized ways that people can request things. Is there one place to go for who has to request access, or do you have to go to 3 different portals and then also IM or email somebody? If you can get to that standardized delivery model, that's going to reduce the cost. User support will go down because people have more self-service tools and they require less hands-on support. From a user perspective, right, you're always looking for more user-friendly interfaces, more self-service options. That's one of the reasons why maybe Amazon has gotten so big. It's super easy to buy from them. You click a few buttons, you find what you need, and 2 days later, typically, something's in your mailbox with whatever you ordered. Same thing can apply from an IAM perspective. You want to make sure you've got those user-friendly interfaces so that people can use them with minimal training, and that there's a lot of tools that users themselves can use to support themselves. Self-service password reset, for example, is a good one. Instead of having to call the help desk, give your folks a way to be able to take care of themselves as much as possible. And then from a risk and audit perspective, right, you want to be able to demonstrate the messaging. How does it help them achieve their goals, right? They want to make sure that they're compliant with the different things like SOX and PCI and other regulations. And one of the real concerns that they have in talking with a lot of auditors over the years is that rubber stamping. They get that email with a massive list of accesses that they may own and people, and they don't have the time or the knowledge, or maybe both, to be able to accurately review that and say, yeah, this is right, or maybe there's some changes to be made. So they end up just saying, yep, looks okay to me, and they don't really take it seriously. You put better tools in front of data owners or access owners, and you reduce the chance of that rubber stamping, and you can give the auditors and folks in your risk department, a better sense that things are getting done in the way that they should be getting done. It's important that from an IAM perspective, throughout all these talks and meetings you may have with both customers and users, that you're building up relationships. That is the best way to get your message across. Take people to lunch, have lunch and learns, try to identify with them, understand their points of view, and make sure that the messaging that you're putting in place really does resonate with them. You want to be seen as an asset to their organization. If that's the case, you're going to have a lot easier chance of getting a user adoption. They're going to be much more receptive to IAM services and potential process changes that may come out of that. So now that we've talked a few different things, we've talked about messaging and stuff, let's talk about how do you get the buy-in throughout the organization, right? You've got some things that you want to get done. How do you make sure that people are moving in sync with you and that they're on board with what you're trying to do? The first thing that you're going to want to do is really understand what are your strategic business goals, especially as it relates for each stakeholder. You may pull that from documentation that's on the website, a prospectus, something like that, if it's a publicly traded company. But really, you want to go out and talk to your folks. What's important to them? Where are they taking the business? What are the things that you're going to need to be able to support? Is your company about to launch a new product or maybe a new portal? How are your customers going to be serviced? How are they going to log in and buy whatever it is that you're going to be putting out there? If you're about to maybe do a merger or an acquisition, one thing that comes up quite a bit in my experience is if it's done correctly, it's a lot easier to make sure that your IAM team is part of those plans so that the new folks that are coming into your organization can hit the ground running. One of the areas that I've seen fail quite a bit is when IAM is not part of that discussion. Now you're left scrambling and trying to figure out, how do you get all the employees that have come over from that merger or that acquisition into your own systems, and it can be a real pain. So you want to understand and really have a seat at the table as part of that discussion. You also want to make sure that your positioning IAM is fundamental to the success for each of those strategic business goals. The stakeholders and the business leaders need to understand that IAM is something that's going to help them be successful, and then you've got to be able to deliver on that. You want to show quick wins, especially if you're starting out from an IAM program. You want to make sure you keep momentum going forward, and that the business, whatever phase it is understanding the value that you're bringing to it. You also want to line up your IAM services to meet the needs first and then get to the wants. You're going to get a lot of feedback as you go along. You're going to have a lot of great ideas, both yourself as a program manager maybe, or maybe as a member of the team, and say, boy, you're really cool if we could do this. You want to make sure you've got requirements taken care of, the things that are truly important, before you start adding bells and whistles. Make sure you've got the cake baked, and then the whipped cream and the cherries can come on top of that. You're also going to want to think about how do you get grassroots support. A lot of messaging may be focused on the top, getting executive buy-in because you're going to need funding, etc. But how do you get folks at the ground level to be excited about IAM? How do you show them that their job is going to get easier. They're going to have better tools. They're going to have better ways to request different things. Maybe it's instead of going from 8 different portals and tribal knowledge to know how to get something done, hey, you know what, now we can just go to one spot, I can request all the different things that I need, and it'll get approved by all the people that need to have to approve it, and then it's just going to automatically happen. So you want to help talk to different admins within the different departments, right? People who may be responsible for onboarding and offboarding, and show them and talk with them to help them understand what's coming and how you can help them. You're going to want to manage expectations, though. And a big thing that's important to me when I'm running a program is make sure that you are not over-promising and under-delivering, but you're under-promising and over-delivering. That's a much better position to be in. Be cautious, especially when you're just starting out with a program. Make sure that you can manage the deliverables. Make sure you stay on track. This is where you have a good team in place to be able to make sure that's happening, and that you're staying within budget. One of the things that may come up as you're going through maybe the sales life cycle and you're working through the different vendors, one thing that's happened in the past is I've seen CEOs and CEOs get really excited about some things they see in a sales demonstration, but you really have to build some foundational elements to make those things happen. So you're going to want to make sure that you manage both up and down when it comes to the expectations. And if there's a case where expectations, maybe need to be readjusted, you're going to have to start thinking about, is there a scope adjustment that needs to be made to make sure that either budget or timing concerns are addressed. And then you're also going to want to skip the FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, doubt, skipping the blame game. Neither of those things, in my mind, add any value. That's time you can spend fixing problems rather than trying to figure out what happened. Hindsight's 20/20. Can't change the past. Decisions that were made in the past were based on information that was available in the past. Having run several programs over the years, I've certainly made my share of mistakes, but at the time when I made them, they were very logical decisions based on the information we had at the time. You're going to have to adjust. IAM is not static, it's very dynamic, and as your different business needs change, you're going to be able to adjust those. So in my mind, it doesn't really help. Especially FUD and blame game. Just move it forward and figure out how you're going to create solutions that solve the needs of the business that have changed. Now, from a user perspective, one of the things you might want to consider to get them to buy in is bribery. Well, now you can't really do that, but I prefer maybe instead of using bribery, consider incentives, right? So how do you get users to want to use your systems, your platforms, your processes? And I've got a story from when I was fairly early on in my IAM career. We had then started to implement an IAM solution. We started with self-service password reset support. It was brand new to the organization, didn't really have that capability before, and so we thought it would be a good idea to try and reduce service desk calls. Well, we put it in place. It worked great. And one of the things that we struggled with was the enrollment rate. People just weren't using it. I had run some metrics and saw that it was beginning of summer and we had just under a 35% enrollment rate, which wasn't great. The system had been live for a couple months and we just were really struggling with getting people to use it. Sat down as a group, started to think about how we might be able to address that. So what we did was we tracked it on 2 fronts. We talked about process, and so the team that I was managing at the time, when people would call in to request a password reset, we would ask them, hey, have you registered with the IAM system? And if not, can we help you with that? Is there something that we can do to help you get registered, or are there any questions we can answer for you? Really try to address the problem right then and there. The other thing we did was I ran a raffle. So what I said was to the organization, we sent out emails and we had different notifications go out. Basically said, hey, you know what? We're going to run a raffle over the next 3 months. Anybody who registers with the self-service password reset system is going to be entered to win an iPad. Now, this was several years ago, so iPads were a really big deal. You can certainly swap that iPad for anything that's kind of a hot item today. That'll certainly get people interested. But over that 3 months, in combination with the process adjustment and the script from the call center, we went from right around 35% enrollment to over 97% in just 3 months. I got to tell you, it was super creative. I'm pretty happy with the way that worked out. And that $350 iPad was probably the best $350 I spent out of a program where we were spending millions of dollars to buy software, install it, configure it, support it, etc. So don't be afraid to get creative with your users. You know, give a little bit of incentive. You probably spent just a whole bunch of money getting software, getting teams in place, adjusting processes. Make sure that you're buttoning up the little things that can have a big impact when it comes to using your different services. So as you've got your program going along, it's going to get better over time. So just like aircraft have evolved over time from the biplane to World War II era, and now you've got jet fighters, the same thing's going to happen with your IAM program and the different services that you offer. So you're going to be continuously improving. And one of the things that you can do to do that improvement is to get feedback from your customers. And that includes both business and the users. You're also going to want to prioritize any enhancements that come back based on any of the feedback or the specific needs that you encounter, whether it's something that's coming from the business or maybe a shift in strategy from the organization. And then you're also going to want to make sure you keep your technology updated. So you want to know what your customers want, what they need, what works, what doesn't work, prioritize what they're looking for, and then from a technology standpoint, you got to keep your stuff updated. I've seen really good products go to waste and die on the vine because there wasn't any time built in for upgrades. So you spent a lot of money getting this stuff in place, and then you didn't put any time in your roadmap for an upgrade cycle. Or maybe you customized the software quite a bit because you weren't willing to adjust processes, and now you're in a position where it's very expensive to try to upgrade to the next version and gain some new functionality or fix maybe some security issues. And it opens the door for saying, well, this software stinks. Well, it's not really the software. Typically, it could be that you didn't, as an organization or as a program, put the right budget from a timing perspective to be able to support the software effectively. The other thing that I really want to stress is that it's okay to get smarter. You can adjust things that need to be adjusted. I mentioned it before, but IAM is not static. It is absolutely dynamic. Things change all the time, and that includes people, process, or technology. And you have to be willing to adjust things that need to be adjusted, and that includes being able to change out a product if it no longer meets the needs of your program. Software is like any other product. It will evolve over time, and the ones that don't will typically get left behind. Using myself as an example, and maybe showing my age a little bit, I had a pager. And then I went from a pager to my good old Motorola flip phone. And then I shifted to a BlackBerry, and now I've gone from Android to iPhone and back and forth. But I'm using much more modern hardware than I was, a few decades ago. The same thing can apply to your IAM tools. If the tools are not meeting your needs, take a look at what's out there and don't be afraid to change that out. One of the things that I see commonly associated with a tool change out is that there's been some sort of shift in personnel within an organization. Some people consider it, a bad thing where we have to change a tool. Not necessarily. If the product didn't keep up and it was great at the time, it's just like anything else. Time to move on to something new. You can talk with your vendors and make it known that there are different features that you're looking for. That's going to help them evolve the product the way you want it to. But you can't be afraid to make changes, especially if it puts you in a position where you're not going to be successful for the future. So a couple of things that I think you should probably consider as I've been talking here for the last few minutes. And the first thing that I probably want to get out here is you need to be able to tell people what you do pretty quickly. Have an elevator speech, right? Hey, my name is Jeff. I work for Jamie. I'm responsible for making sure that we know who has access to what and that we have the people have the right access. Super simple. Doesn't have to be complex to be effective. If that sparks their interest, now you can start to add on and tell other things that you might do or evolve the conversation. You need to be able to quickly tell people why that's important. Why is it important that we have IAM? Well, we make sure you've got the right access so you can do your job. Also make sure that when someone leaves the company, that access gets shut off and mitigates or reduces any risk to the organization, right? Can certainly impact them. If there's a breach that might affect profit sharing or stock prices, things that can be very detrimental to the organization. So these are things that you want to consider when you try to demonstrate the value to the different folks that you may be talking with. You also want to understand, the IAM Spheres of Influence. So how do you craft your message around security, cost, usability, efficiency, and compliance? When you're talking with different folks, find out what is it that their motive is and understand how do you make sure that you're working a message that will resonate with them. You need to understand your constituents and make sure that your message applies to that. Some other things that I think you probably want to watch out for as we get wrapped up here is changes in management and leadership. So this can be a serious impact to an IAM program. If you've got a new CISO, a CIO, a CEO, someone who's relatively high up the food chain, you've got to be able to effectively communicate what is the IAM strategy. And you should have an IAM strategy. It shouldn't just be, yeah, we're doing this and there's really no overall plan. You've got to understand that there may be changes that are coming from the business perspective, and you're going to have to adjust that IAM strategy to match it. So you need to be in sync with that senior level management, especially from a program management perspective. Now that works another way too. If there are changes in the IAM leadership, that can absolutely kill a program. I have seen and witnessed this where a program manager has left the organization and the entire program ground to a halt. There was no succession plan in place. There weren't anybody who could pick up that mantle and keep driving things forward. And there's a couple of things that can happen out of that. First, things just grind to a halt. Things get a lot slower. You start to lose wins, and it just takes a long time to recover. And then the other thing is it may not recover at all. It may turn into something that is going to take much more to fix, and then that typically leads to even more changes from a personnel perspective when it comes to the IAM team. So definitely something that you're going to want to watch out for and be able to address and consider as part of an IAM program and how it evolves. We talked about it before, right? Technology not keeping up with your needs. You've got to make sure that you're using appropriate tools for your organization. One of the things that I commonly see is trying to use maybe like a ticketing system as an IAM platform. Yeah, probably okay for the short term. Is it something that you're going to be able to scale and keep growing with? Or is it going to require a lot of customization? Make sure you're using the appropriate tools for the job and make sure that those are keeping up with your needs. Again, talk with your vendors. Let them know if there is a feature or functionality that you're looking for. Chances are you're probably not alone. And the more of their customers that are hearing, here's what we want, the better that software is going to be for you down the road as they make changes to that. You're going to want to watch out for apathy from the team, whether it's the IAM team or business or users. Why are we doing this? Why do we care? Make sure you're getting the message out, communicating with the different folks to help them understand the value that's coming through. You're going to want to watch out for loss of funding for sure. IAM is a program. I said it before, it's not a project. You may have different projects within your program, but you need to make sure that IAM is funded as a program. It is forever. People are going to have logons. They're going to want to get access to different systems. New systems are going to come on board. New data is going to be created, and you're going to need access to it. You've got to make sure that that funding is appropriate for the services that you're trying to deliver, and then it covers people, process, and technology. You want to make sure that people are aware of the program. What are the services that you're offering to the organization? Self-service password reset, one-stop shop for access requests. Here's a routine cycle that we're going to put in place to review access every quarter for a sensitive financial file share, something along those lines. Make sure people are aware of what your services offer. Another way that helps too is that, and I've seen this quite a bit, is where some area of the business will go off and buy a piece of software and not be in sync with the IAM services that are already out there. So now you've got yet another shadow IT system that's out there being managed by somebody instead of taking advantage of the services and capabilities that you may be building out as part of an IAM program. So from a program management perspective, you want to make sure that your IAM team has a seat at the table, whether it's architecture review boards or software review boards or similar. Make sure that people are aware of the service that you have, and that services that are being brought to the organization will take advantage of what you've got out there. Things like single sign-on, MFA, those sorts of things are great areas to look for opportunities. The other thing to look out for here is wins. You want to make sure that you're demonstrating wins to the organization in a routine manner. If you don't have a recent win, take a look at your roadmap and your strategy. What is it that you're delivering? And figure out what's the gap there. It's important to note here, from at least from my perspective, is that a win doesn't have to be major. Doesn't have to be something that's groundbreaking and that everyone experiences. If you can go to a CISO, for example, and say, hey, you remember how a couple of months ago we couldn't accurately tell who had access to this file share that has sensitive IP? Well, guess what? Now we can. That's a win. Big or small, you want to celebrate those. You want to make sure you keep track of those so that you can show the movement of the needle of maturity when it comes to your IAM program over time. And again, doesn't have to be a big win that's highly visible. It could be something behind the scenes that maybe only a couple of people care about, but is still important to the overall success of the organization. And you want to make sure you promote those. Make sure that you're celebrating wins with the team. That'll help with apathy. Hey, we just got this done. This is a big deal. It's important. You know, invite the business in. Help them celebrate, throw a pizza party, whatever might be appropriate for your organization to be able to celebrate that. So I think those are the things that I would look for, and I'm going to turn it back over to Jamie now to see if we had any questions come in that I can hopefully try to address.
Thanks, Jeff, and thank you for all the insights based on your experience managing IAM programs previously with other organizations. That was a lot of really helpful information that you've shared here today. So just as a reminder, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email webinar@identropy.com so that we can go ahead and get those questions answered for you. In the meantime, I had one here trickle in. Let's see. Jeff, the question is, what if we don't have the budget for all of the roles you mentioned for the IAM team? Can they be part-time dedicated?
Very good question. Actually, that's a great question because we always know that teams are always fully staffed and you always have all the money in the world you want. Actually, what happens in the real world is you're probably wearing different hats. So you might see that those different roles that I showed earlier, you're going to have probably people starting multiple roles, especially if it's a smaller organization, or maybe it's an IAM program that's just getting off the ground, or maybe isn't very complex. Pretty common for engineering, for example, to maybe do testing and support for different tools. Program managers are probably doing a lot of project management work to make sure that things are operating effectively. You might want to look at some of the items that you're looking to build out, maybe like on the analytics side, and try to keep those relatively simple up front, and maybe move that to be part of an operations support team to run those different types of metrics. If you're a smaller team and you're especially challenged, you might want to invest in some more technology, things that can reduce some of that manual work and automate it. One thing that immediately kind of comes to mind, and I'm sure there are other examples, would be maybe some tools around behavior analysis, using some of the newer things out there that use machine learning, things like an Exabeam, for example, that can take that IAM data that you're accumulating and do something with it automatically, right? Instead of having to have an analyst or somebody pore over it, set it up and integrate it with your IAM platform to take some actions based on whatever logic you decide is appropriate. In any case, it's important that from a program perspective that you're clearly communicating the benefits of the program to make sure that you're adequately funded, because if you're adequately funded, that tends to lead to appropriate staffing and the tools. So I think that's probably the way that I would approach that scenario.
Thanks, Jeff. So I have a second question here. So we'll go ahead and put this question out there for you to answer, and then we can wrap up the webinar for everyone. But this question here, and I think that we both have experience with this type of question. I've certainly heard it when I'm working closely with customers. So it's regarding difficulty of stakeholders. So this person here writes, I have some difficult stakeholders who don't want to give up control. What are some ideas for winning them over and getting them to play ball with respect to the identity and access management program?
Yes, sort of the Game of Thrones of IAM, so to speak. I guess the first thing that I would probably do is try to look at the IAM program from their perspective, try to understand that, what is the benefit that they're getting out of whatever it is you're trying to build, and when does that come? what are the business processes that they're going to have to change as a result of the IAM program, especially when it comes to their area. I think really it's a motivation question. Understand what is their motive for the resistance. That's going to help you determine how you address the concerns. Is it a people, a process, or a technology problem, or other? And then from there, being able to try and address it appropriately. I guess one thing I'd probably note there is that you're not going to be able to solve all the problems, especially not all on day one. And that's something that's going to have to be communicated clearly. That, yeah, we don't have an answer for this, or that's coming, but not until down the road. You've got to be able to recognize that, and then make sure that again you don't overpromise something that you just can't deliver based on the capabilities you have, whether it's tools, or people to support it. So I would understand the motivation for the resistance, and then try to address it from that side. And this is where relationships help out quite a bit. If you can build relationships, demonstrate wins, and show people that your program is effective, I think that gives you a lot of currency to be able to work through some of those resistance cases.
Great, thank you, Jeff. So if we didn't get to your question, as I said in the beginning, we will be sure that we get back to you with an email response. If there are any questions that come to mind later, please feel free to email webinar@identropy.com at any time, or you can visit us on our website. There is an informational page that certainly if you wanted to submit questions that way, you can certainly do so. So with that, I want to bring this webinar today to its conclusion and just thank everyone again for participating with us today. Hope you all have a good afternoon. Thank you.